A grimoire is not simply a book of magic spells, but a text containing occult knowledge to alter one's reality. Learn more about the history of grimoires, the grimoire tradition, and its modern developments by watching this episode. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Angela Puca and welcome to my Symposium. I'm a PhD and religious studies scholar, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. It is mainly believed that the term grimoire originated from the old French word grammaire, which was initially used to refer to all books written in Latin. By the 18th century, the term had gained its now common usage in French and had begun to be used to refer solely to books of magic. So grimoire is a relatively recent term, and that's why scholars of ancient and medieval literary magic generally refrain from using the term, precisely because the word was not used in those periods. The term grimoire only entered the English vocabulary in the 19th century. Now the term is widespread, and numerous works of fiction and guides to modern pagan practice included in their title and their content. The term was adopted due to the Anglophone occult interest in a range of manuscripts and cheap print books of magic and conjuration that were illegally published in 18th century France, most notably the Grand Grimoire and the Grimoire of Pope Honorius. One of the early members of the Order of the Golden Dawn, Arthur Edward Waite, was influential in spreading knowledge of these French grimoires through publishing extracts in his Compendium of Western Literary Magic, the Book of Black Magic and of Pags. Another text that helped popularize the term was a 1936 collection of short stories entitled The Grimoire and Other Supernatural Stories by Montague Summers, the famous historian of witchcraft that condemned the evil influence of grimoires in his History of Black Magic. Today, the widespread acknowledgement of the grimoire depends partly on the birth and growth of modern pagan witchcraft after the Second World War, and the representation of modern witchcraft in movies and TV shows, such as Charmed, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and so on. What's a TV show on witchcraft without a grimoire or a secret book of magic spells, right? But what is a grimoire? We know that it's a book of magic, but not all books of magic are grimoires. For instance, some magic books cannot be seen as grimoires because they strictly tackled natural magic, namely the discovery and understanding of the occult or secret properties of plants, animals, and stones. This is a tradition of literary magic that dates to antiquity, with Pliny the Elder's Natural History, written in the 70s of the Common Era, that laid out the foundations for numerous other volumes of the same time that would be produced in the medieval and Renaissance Islamic and Christian worlds. Yet these books of natural magic are not grimoires because of their lack of engagement with entities outside of the natural world. The term grimoire conjures images of old books bearing the title in print or manuscript containing guidance on how to create protective talismans and to conjure spirits, as in the famous Grand Grimoire, where you find instructions to call upon the devil himself. Grimoires often contained a mix of Christian prayers, exorcisms, astrological information, lists of lucky days, remedies, and mundane household tips. So, to offer a definition, a grimoire is an instruction manual that allows human beings to manipulate the world through magic, using rituals, different types of symbols, and working with various entities. The sheer possession of a grimoire was not deemed enough to unleash its power. Grimoires could only be unlocked by experts who were thought to have special powers due to their learnedness, possession of innate powers bestowed through birthright, their association with the spirit world, and or their association with the mystique of foreignness. While being literate was essential to the reputations of many cunning folks, their education was often insufficient to understand the Latin words and sentences, occult symbols, and references contained in the grimoires they possessed. Even so, they would still use these grimoires to create bricolage charms that consisted of various passages or signs and symbols which looked magical. The result was a new form of literary magic that made no intrinsic sense from a learned perspective, but had a clear purpose for the clients who bought them. Such written talismans were often folded, sealed, or placed in receptacles by cunning folks, so the client had no idea what they contained anyway. What was important was that they derived from books of magic that clients could not access. This is interesting as it may mean that grimoires were believed to have some intrinsic magic power, or even a power related to the inaccessibility of the information. And that power could be exercised regardless of whether the content was fully or partially understood. Now, in Christian Europe, the monasteries were the primary producers of these grimoires. Just as in medieval China, Buddhists or Taoist monks seem to have been the main compilers of occult works. That's because the clergy were the very few people who were literate at the time. This, however, begs the question, how could the monasteries be so central to the diffusion of grimoires when the churches had for a century condemned magic literature? Well, as it is often the case, things are not that clear-cut. The intellectual milieu of the 12th and 13th centuries hosted fascinating debates about the definition and categorization of magic. The pursuit of natural magic, seen as a scientific exploration of the occult properties of God's natural world, was argued by some to be an honorable, devout task. Some even argued that seeking dialogue with the angels through ritual invocations for the same ends was likewise a godly exercise. Hence why angelic communication became so central to the medieval grimoire. The counter-argument was that to call upon the celestial spirits was presumptuous and heretical, and that such an endeavor would necessarily involve the devil and his demons. And let's not forget the grimoires that instructed on how to conduct pagan rites and conjure demons for corrupted and carnal purposes. Who would want that? During the 15th century, these types of grimoires corroborated the institutional concern that grimoires were a tool of an increasingly powerful Satan. And here we are, at the dawn of the age of the witch trials. The Renaissance part of the 15th century saw the juxtaposition of two contrasting cultural elements: the persecution of witches on the one hand, and the humanist movement on the other. Indeed, the fear of a satanic conspiracy conducted through the agency of witches and magicians began to generate localized persecutions in Central Europe, while the humanist movement inspired a renewed interest in the mystical and occult literature of the ancient pagan world. Influential in the formation and development of the grimoire tradition were Italian and German philosophers who followed in the footsteps of open-minded medieval theologians. They drew inspiration from newly found texts, such as the Corpus Hermeticum, attributed to the ancient man-god Hermes Trismegistus, and translated into Latin by Marsilio Ficino in 1471. Kabbalah was also introduced to new audiences through the 3 books of occult philosophy by the German humanist Cornelius Agrippa. Agrippa's name would become one of the most referenced in future grimoires, not only thanks to his own writings, but also because of magical works that were later attributed to him, especially the 4th book of occult philosophy, which got notoriety throughout Europe. Agrippa was not the only one who got posthumously attributed grimoires that he would have abhorred, and yet got him notoriety. In the early modern period, manuscripts circulated that were ascribed to the renowned medieval scientist Roger Bacon and Michael Scott, while various medieval popes gathered a reputation as magicians that was swiftly spread by Protestant propagandists. The early 9th century Pope Leo III became the author of a late 17th century French grimoire, and around the same time Pope Honorius III usurped his ancient Theban homonymous, claiming to be the creator of the grimoire of Pope Honorius. By the 17th century, the print had a profound impact on the nature of grimoires, their use and dissemination. As a technology, the print was perceived as reducing the magical potency of the grimoire due to the standardization that it entails. The printing press and rag paper were seen as depersonalizing the production of literary magic, limiting the diversity of inks and writing surfaces. For instance, with the vellum, which had become integral to the medieval grimoire tradition. Yet, the printed grimoire simply became the source material for a continuing, vibrant, and democratic manuscript grimoire tradition that is evidenced by the prosecution records of the early modern period. When popular print and manuscript grimoires interacted in the late 18th century, new regional grimoire traditions emerged based upon false attributions. We already mentioned some French examples, while in Germany and Scandinavia, famous were the grimoires attributed to the semi-legendary 16th century magician Dr. Faustus. A book that would have global outreach was the 6th and 7th books of Moses. In Scandinavia, the genre of black books included the grimoires under the pseudonym of Cyprianus. Interesting to notice that Saint Cyprian, a legendary 3rd century bishop of Antioch, was the inspiration for the attribution of these 19th century black books. In the folklore, and that proves the variability of the grimoire tradition, Cyprianus was either an evil Danish or a humble student. As Davies explains, the age of the American grimoire began with the arrival of a German immigrant named John George Ochman in 1802. He made part of his living by publishing cheap religious, medical, and occult tracts in German for the Pennsylvania Dutch population. When his most influential text appeared in English with the title The Long Lost Friend, his work became influential far beyond the Pennsylvania Dutch and into African American popular magic. Later, in the early 20th century, an Ohio huckster named William Loran de Lawrence became a legend in parts of the Caribbean and West Africa thanks to his astute advertising in foreign newspapers, marketing techniques, and mail order distribution. He got a reputation as a master of magic by plagiarizing several books of ritual magic compiled by 19th century British ritual magicians and repackaging the 6th and 7th books of Moses. The democratization and spread of grimoires across social levels and cultures increased during the 19th century and early 20th century, generating a revived interest in ritual magic and its sources. Books such as Francis Barrett's The Magus or Celestial Intelligencer which didn't get notoriety when he was initially published in 1801, was now getting the attention of magic practitioners and occultists. Throughout the Enlightenment, solitary and small fraternities of intellectual occultists continued to practice ritual magic, and Freemasonry provided a conducive environment, ritual structure, and means of networking. Later, in the late 19th century, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn prompted a new golden age for the grimoire in intellectual and artistic circles. One of its members, Arthur Edward Waite, was particularly influential thanks to his publication of the Book of Black Magic and of Pacts, containing extensive conjurations collected from early modern printed texts, 18th century manuscripts, and French chapbook grimoires. Another member of the order who was influential in this respect was Samuel Liddell Mathers. While Waite was not using those grimoires to inform his ritual practice, Mathers drew inspiration from them for both his and the Golden Dawn's rituals. We also owe Mathers the first English edition of the Key of Solomon, published in 1889, as well as an English translation of a late 17th century or early 18th century French grimoire called the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin, which claimed to be the distilled knowledge of a 15th century Kabbalist. Aleister Crowley was also inspired by these sources in his conceptualization of Thelema. An easy example would be the central role of acquiring knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel that draws upon the just mentioned Abramelin text. With the birth and rise of Wicca after the Second World War and the consequent growth of the pagan witchcraft movement, a new reformulation of familiar grimoires emerged, now seen as the literary expression of an ancient pagan fertility cult, leading to the birth of a new type of grimoire, the Book of Shadows. Early Wicca didn't intend in its inception to lead to the democratization of magic that it later prompted. In fact, the Book of Shadows was initially meant to be kept a secret known only to initiates and transmitted through manuscript copying. Yet, just as it happened with the Golden Dawn and its secret rituals, it only took a few decades for the original contents of the Book of Shadows to appear in print. For contemporary pagans that don't want to engage with the Judeo-Christian magic traditions, there are various ways to work with grimoires. There are now new personalized grimoire guides for this diverse occult community. Inspired by the Book of Shadows, these provide systems of ritual magic working drawn from an eclectic mix of global traditions that feed off other practitioner-inspired texts and beliefs, as well as recent works by anthropologists, sociologists, and historians. Thus, the contemporary Western grimoire tradition has evolved to have its sources more accessible, while the grimoires used by practitioners, heavily influenced by the eclectic Wiccan version of the Book of Shadows, draw upon a wide-ranging mix of Western esoteric texts and concepts, Oriental mysticism, and shamanistic practices. Owen Davies remarks that it would be interesting to see the inclusion of more Islamic literary magic by non-Islamic practitioners, as this is a cultural exchange that is yet to be seen in the eclectic esoteric milieu. And what do you deem to be the most influential grimoire for contemporary practitioners? Or indeed, which was the most influential for you? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to make more videos on the grimoire tradition and on specific grimoires, but I can only do so, as well as make more content on the academic study of esotericism, if I'm granted the honor of your support. So if you have the means and can help at all, I would really appreciate it if you supported my work with a one-off PayPal donation by joining memberships or my inner symposium on Patreon, where you will get access to our Discord server, monthly lectures, a book club, one-to-one calls with me, and all sorts of other perks depending on your chosen tier. And otherwise, I really appreciate any kind of support to our community. For instance, if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends and family and everybody who might be interested in learning more about the Grimoire tradition. Activate the notification bell so that you will never miss a new upload from me. And as always, stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.